has taken over the position, the head position, when Anne vacated it,
More or less.
more or less.
Yeah, there was Andrea in between.
There's another person.
Yeah.
And they have been good friends for a long time. Anne has written this book that you know called Fight Through the Branches, which I haven't had a chance to read. And Angela has written two wonderful books. One is a short story book and the other is a novel. And I'm blanking on the
Lay
name.
It On
Lay It On My Heart is the novel, Home Remedies is the
Yeah,
play.
she hails from Kentucky.
Yes.
And these are books about, well, the one I remember very well is about a girl coming of age in Kentucky and all the strictures of Christian life you have to conform to or not. And it's quite moving. And this book, I understand, is also quite moving. It's Anne's first book. And she has published in various journals and magazines all over the place. And she's going to be in conversation with Anne. So I'm going to leave it to them. So please welcome Angela Pneuman and
Thank you so much, all of you, for coming. Angela is my coach on this book, and we've known each other for a good long time, maybe since 2005, since you first started coming to
Well, I worked for Greg before
Oh.
that.
Robert Mondavi,
Yeah,
since
Robert
1998.
Mondavi,
Yeah.
Angela, yeah, that's right. He came home one day and said, "There's a stinger fell out at Mondavi." So our plan is to read. I was going to read a bit from my novel, one short chapter, and then Angela and I are going to have a conversation and open it up to you for questions. My book, The Light Through the Branches, covers 3 time periods. It begins in 2018, more or less the present, but I always think it's the pre-pandemic present. And then it moves back to a trip that mother and daughter went on. It's about a mother and daughter, so when it opens, the mother is in memory care at a nursing facility, and daughter is taking care of her. And then it moves back in time to a trip they took together when the mother was strong and vital 10 years before. And then it opens up into the childhood of the daughter with her mother in Santa Maria, California in the 1950s, late 1950s. So it has these 3 distinct time periods, and they alternate and are juxtaposed throughout the entire book. I had written a novel before that was just 1 year in the childhood of this character, Kate, and I was dissatisfied with it. I needed this big expanse of time. And I chose tonight to read for you the first chapter from the childhood section, which is chapter 7. On a sidewalk shaded by gray-green pepper trees, I run. I am 11, or about to turn 11. On my feet, saddle shoes, white and brown. With each step, pink and white peppercorns burst under my feet, releasing their smell. A current of electricity runs from my toes, up my legs and torso, all the way to my scalp. My blue dance case bangs against my thigh. I've left one of my places, school, and fly toward another, Miss Sylvia's School of Dance, downtown. My town is small enough that I have the run of it. Last year, Miss Sylvia promoted me to advanced intermediates. Your feet and legs are strong, but you need to work on your arms, she said. Today's class is special, a master class taught by Monsieur Lambert, formerly of the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. At Main Street, the wind blowing from the ocean and over fields hits me full in the body. The February sun slants strongly from the west. It will be dark by the time class ends, and Mom will pick me up. Main to Broadway, Broadway to church, and 10 more running steps to the glass doors and a single flight of stairs. The studio is over the Chevrolet dealership. I enter a high-ceilinged room lit by industrial-style windows. On the far side stands Miss Sylvia, next to a slim man wearing a scarf. Miss Sylvia, also very slim and pale, wears a lavender leotard and a matching chiffon skirt. Her bright red hair is arranged like a flower on top of her head. I'm first into the dressing room, but soon others join me. We take off our school clothes, talking and laughing. The sun filters through dust motes, lighting ponytails and cheeks. The other girls wear bras, soft white training bras, but my chest is bare. I turn away, embarrassed by the swollen nubs that show beneath my leotard. I wriggle into my pink tights, soiled at the feet, never clean enough. There's a mark on each calf where my toe brushes my leg in passé. I pull on my beloved leotard, copen blue, a fancy word for sky blue, my father's favorite color. At the armpits, there's a slight sour smell, my smell from last Tuesday's class. Next come my point shoes. From my case, I take the wad of yellow lambswool and wrap it around my toes. I tie the pink satin ribbons across my instep, then twice around my ankle. The advanced students claim the main bar along the mirrored wall. Their grown-up figures, black and pink, multiply in the glass. We younger ones crowd around along the shorter bar under the windows. Single or double, my friend Linda whispers as class begins. We can't understand Monsieur Lambert. Miss Sylvia sends an older girl to help us. Monsieur Lambert moves us to the middle of the room for the adagio combination, port de bras, but without the bar. Let your arms be as soft as willow branches, he says. Your fingers are leaves. One leg lifts into arabesque, and I wobble, catching Monsieur Lambert's eye. A few minutes later, I see him watching me again as we do tour jetés, turning and leaping in a circle. Legs and arms slash the air like windmills. From the corner, Monsieur Lambert calls, finally, grand jeté combination and révérence. It's Kate's birthday today, Miss Sylvia says. Let her go first. The big girls push me to the head of the line. Shaking with nerves and pleasure, I let one measure of Tchaikovsky's waltz go by, then begin. Soubresaut, soubresaut, run, 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 leap. I curtsy deeply to my teachers, and Miss Sylvia kisses me on the cheek. In the dressing room, I'm teased and hugged, sweaty and giddy, still ringing with the music. I pull on my skirt and sweater. I pack my ballet things in my case. Outside in the studio, I look for my mother along the row of chairs near the entrance. She isn't there. My stepfather, Ray, leans against the doorway, wearing work clothes, overalls and a denim jacket, and chatting to the mothers. My heart falls, disappointment and embarrassment combined. I race ahead of him down the stairs. Not so fast, girlie, he calls after me. Where's the car? I ask. We're not going to the car. He puts a hand on my shoulder and steers me past the lighted windows of the Chevrolet dealership. I grow nervous. His voice sounds different than usual. He's trying to be nice, to make me like him. Maybe I have a surprise for you. I relax. Maybe Mom has ordered the ship and shore blouse I want, or new patent leather shoes, and she's asked Ray to pick them up. After all, it's my birthday. He pushes me around the corner onto Broadway, past 2 more shops, until we stand in front of Collier's Apparel, the best women's shop in town. Mrs. Reinhardt, from the church choir, stands behind the counter, tall, silver-haired, dressed in navy blue. She greets us by name. "What can I do for you?" she asks. "We're here to buy this young lady a brassiere," Ray says, "her first." My heart seizes. The blood rushes to my face. I want to disappear. Mrs. Reinhardt tells Ray to sit and me to follow her to the back of the shop, into a small curtained room, no more than a corner with a mirror and a chair. "Your mother should do this for you," she says. Her hands on my shoulders, her eyes finding mine in the mirror. I redden. "She's very busy with Mikey and teaching." "Take off your blouse, dear, so I can measure you." Mrs. Reinhardt pulls the red curtain closed. "Mom doesn't approve of me growing up too soon. This isn't her idea. If Ray is buying me a bra, that means he's been looking at me. He's noticed the buds forming on my chest." I hang my blouse on a hook. Mrs. Reinhardt returns and stretches the yellow tape around my chest. 28, she says, just as I thought. From a cardboard box, she pulls a soft white garment, which she helps me into, fastening the back, tightening the straps. She turns me toward the mirror and settles her hands on my shoulders. Perfect. I've wanted a bra just like this one, a training bra, like the girls in my class at school and ballet have, but not like this, not from him. Back at the cash register, Ray is talking to Mrs. Reinhardt in his familiar way, not noticing her silences. "Don't you want 2 so one can be laundered?" she asks. "Just the one." I murmur goodbye and step out before him. The shops are closed, the sidewalk's dark by the time we get into Ray's Pontiac. We take the same route home that I ran this afternoon, under the pepper trees. At Main and Broadway, we wait for what feels like forever for the light to change. I wanted the bra, and Ray guessed it. That's the terrible part. He'll expect something in return. Gratitude, obedience. I hug my ballet case to my chest. Tomorrow I'll tell my best friend, Debbie, but not how I got the bra. We turn from Main Street to Thornhill. Ray's shoulders are hunched over the wheel, and he smells of machine oil and pipe tobacco. He's a mechanic at the oil refinery plant, and he's worked the day shift. My real father lives in Santa Monica and works at a desk solving hard mathematical problems. I'm proud of him. He's gentle and handsome and smart. Yesterday I received a birthday present from him, a ballerina doll with a comical face and yellow yarn for hair. Her skirt is white tulle and her slippers satin. I need to name her. Matilda, I say to myself. Matilda, I say again, closing my eyes. She's in a curtsy, the same as we just did in class. I cling to the thought of her now, at home on my whatnot shelf. Matilda. "Cat got your tongue?" Ray asks, his voice more like his normal one, gruff. I don't answer. as we enter our street, he looks at me, his eyes small and mean. Aren't you gonna thank me? I muttered words under my breath.
I love that chapter because it's a combination of excitement and joy in the ballet class, all, and then this very subtle introduction of what becomes the main conflict of the book, this inappropriate, at the very least, stepfather who becomes much worse, is encapsulated so nicely around the occasion of the birthday. And it just fits so beautifully and really tragically together almost, you know, and you get the sense of how vulnerable this young girl is, and how kind of, you know, and maybe an intimation of what's in store, which helps propel the novel, helpfully and upsettingly. So I have not heard you read that before. It's such a wonderful chapter. Yeah, I've prepared some questions.
Okay, good.
I worked with Anne reading several versions of this book, and it was just my great pleasure to see it sort of come to its fullness. I'm curious, and I think other people might be curious too, about how this started for you, how the whole project started, and whether at first you conceived of it as a novel or a memoir. And I know you went back and forth, so I thought people might be interested.
I actually didn't. I talked to someone earlier, Meg there. I've been writing fiction since high school. I love to write fiction. And any time I haven't written much memoir. I guess, well, no, I did write the essay that I published that I told you about earlier. That was memoir. I really like the freedom of fiction, and well, like in this chapter, it occurred to me, if you write memoir, if you just write this in memoir, that girl, the distance from the girl, I have to really, as an author, as a creative person, help her. Because if I just stick with what her words are, her vocabulary, I'm not going to make it interesting enough for adults. I guess I'm really a little off track of your question, but I can only say more intuitively, I like the freedom of fiction. As a girl, I had a big imagination. I loved to read, and I loved fairy tales, and that's the best I can do.
Yeah, I'm just curious about where, since it's sort of a book, and we've talked about this with my work too, it has a foundation in life, but then it departs, and those moments of departure can be hard to give yourself permission to do when you start there. So I'm curious.
You often gave me permission to depart. And another great helper I had, my Chrissy, in the last phase of the writing, she had a really good, once she said, I can tell that's something that really happened, but I don't think it's helping this scene. It's funny, it's an interesting little thing, but get rid of it. So you have to have that awareness of sharpening.
Yeah.
I mean, you were always helping me with
and
that.
making things more dramatic. Like quite often real life it has a great deal of emotion, but it doesn't have dramatic tension and dramatic action. And so that's where we invent in order to kind of match the emotional pitch. Yeah. You have to invent action and dialogue.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I was raised with a pretty polite mother. We didn't express our deepest feelings a lot. And so in writing this book, I had to depart from those rather polite, controlled people in order to get the dramatization, get the feelings out and spoken. And Kirsten was in my writing group working on this, and she actually urged me, no, you know, you're holding back on a confrontation between mother and daughter. You gotta let it happen. And that chapter was entirely invented. And I think it's a very strong chapter, so it's just, yeah, having that much more freedom. But I do like, I have an essay about this on my website, a short essay. I have a really good memory. I just was, maybe because my childhood was remarkable, was checkered, I have a very good memory, and I'm using that as a resource. My friends and family tease me about how I can remember what I wore, what other people wore at a certain occasion. It's just something I have, and I'm using. I think that's true of you too.
Yeah, it's true, yeah. I remember a lot. Now, my mother says I remember most of it incorrectly. I think the book really benefits, though, from the restraint and the politeness in the culture, in the family culture, and then you forcing the characters to break out of that, so that it feels like a rupture. It feels like, I think Charles Baxter, who teaches at the conference, has said a couple times we find great value in the unretractable statement. And the unretractable statement, you know, doesn't really happen when all the statements are kind of dramatic and unretractable. It happens when, you know, you have this culture of restraint and politeness, and then you have the unretractable statement. I was thinking of that chapter where the mother says something to Ray. I think it's she confronts him. Kate says to her mother, "He never stopped." She's looking for a reason to divorce him.
Yeah.
And instead of having listened to Kate early on and divorcing him because of what she's told, and now she's looking for her own reason to divorce him, and she's going to use that.
Yeah.
And her outrage, you know, and Kate's outrage when she says, "Remember that one time you said he was abusing you?" And Kate's just like, "What do you mean? He never stopped." Then the whole book kind of breaks open, and the mother's unable to deny that anymore. And it's that power of the unretractable statement, but it's like in a context of great restraint. So the moment is so powerful.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Forget it.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the people in your life who lived the things that are based in life, as they've read the book, have they had responses to the departure, or responses to like alternate memories, or have?
My sister is the main one. My mother is gone now, and sadly, my older brother died too before he could read this. But my sister has read it, been very supportive, enjoyed it, had no quibbles, had no. My other brother, Mikey, who's mentioned here, the one who's so little, he hasn't read it yet, so I don't know.
The dancer, is he the dancer?
He's the dancer, yeah. So, no, I can't say that. I said, some of them I think are afraid to read it. You know, it's a responsibility, I guess, or something.
Well, there's always a conversation with your family where if something is or seems to be based in life, then it's been my experience that people who you never had in mind when you write something think you're writing about them. But you did have in mind when you write something, you have no idea. But either way, it's kind of a problem.
Yeah, there was, I had a nice communication with the woman now my age, who is the model, who is the original for a best friend met in college. And I think she has forgotten that she used to refer to herself as girlkin. Girlkin and boykin. She had this girlkin boykin thing that she would say, and she enjoyed having that kind of given back to her. And said that's nice for her. Yeah.
Girlkin?
Girlkin. Boykin.
You mentioned that the novel takes place along 3 different timelines.
Mhm.
And I'm always fascinated by novels I mean, to me, it feels like any work has things that rupture it and that fracture it and things that unify it. And there's always a balance between this fracturing and this unifying. And that's some of the satisfaction of reading comes in, like, navigating the balance between, and yours is fractured in terms of time and place, but also unified in terms of place. So it takes place in 3 different timelines in sort of central and southern California and northern California, and also Oklahoma, where
Iowa. Iowa and Omaha.
Oh, and Omaha, yeah, sorry, Omaha, and where they go on this very
Nebraska.
contemporary trip. And then it also has a large cast, even though it has a single point of view, it has a large cast. So there are all these things that fracture the book, and then there are these things that unify the book, like the point of view and the relationship with the mother, and then this sort of echo of the abuse, both, from before it starts to years later.
Many years later.
Yeah, and also I think the progress of culture, for lack of a better word, from the sort of late 50s, early 60s through the kind of radical Bay Area, era and through to the 2000s and COVID even. So we get this swath of the time of the changing times. And I'm interested in 2 questions. One is, your decision making around the time periods of the novel and how to structure it in those times. And then in the second part of that question, I was thinking about Alice Munro, as we've talked about, and some of the decisions, she made about, most of you are probably familiar with what's been going on with the newest revelations about Alice Munro. But she chose to stay with her second husband, who abused her daughter after knowing about it for quite some time. She didn't know about it for many years.
Yeah.
But then even after she found out about it, she had a response that seems maybe to many contemporary people to be objectionable, and yet I always think of I try to think of it, both in a complex way. Like there's that, and then there's what was happening to women in agency at the time, and how those choices all come to bear.
And her own childhood.
In her own childhood.
Yeah.
And I think
It's
when I
really
think of the mother in your book, I think she made likewise very, kind of unsympathetic decisions, and then
Objectionable,
so
But then I think there's some sympathy, there's some rationale, there's some background given about her.
So
Okay,
two
back to
complicated
your,
questions.
well, back to your question about the time periods. So I wrote a novel a dozen years ago that was just 1 year in the late 50s, just 1 year of Kate's childhood. Might have even started about the same place. And I mentioned that I wasn't satisfied with, making a story end or making it all occur there. And then I took your class.
Oh, that's right, the left margin.
And I started working on the Omaha part, and I really enjoyed that. And I found I could be more humorous, and I liked working with an adult narrator who, was really being bitchy about her mother to her, just quietly. Getting into a fight with her over a really stupid thing. I really enjoyed that. Oh, this is very freeing. So the first manuscript that Angela saw was the Omaha trip and the distant past. And she said, it was 175 pages. At half the length of it is down. And she said, this can be much bigger. And I actually went into the third dimension of the present, 2018, to solve a logical problem. I had my character in 2008 or whatever, talking in her head to her therapist, in her head, and having conversations with her. But there were inconsistencies of time, because my real therapist, I didn't start talking till 2018. And it was, it's hard to explain, but there were inconsistencies. I thought, well, why not go into the therapist's office? Why not have a frame, a framing element to this novel? And it kind of goes together with what you were saying about cultural changes. Because of course we take our life problems now to therapists and we get immense help. And again, it would have been a new character. I'm told that this character, this therapist is very a good character. I enjoyed writing her. Although I took immense liberties there because I couldn't remember everything said. But so that gave me permission. And then I think again with Angela's help, I thought, well, I'll only be in the therapist's office in 2018, 1920. And I thought, no, I don't have to do that. And I can go into the nursing home and I can be in the kitchen of my house. You see what I mean? So it was a great help. And it got me into the pandemic and I could, and into even some political stuff. So that
It also brought up another theme of the book, which I had sort of sensed was pushing against the surface the whole way through, but this idea of love and where do you find love, and if you long for love from a source where it's not forthcoming, it doesn't mean you can't find it in yourself. And that all came up in the present, which turned out to be so powerful at the the end of the book, and it really sort of has that thread that you can then trace backward through the book when it comes to the surface.
I think that material was starting, to infiltrate, and it was too soon.
Yeah.
And I needed this other dimension or this other layering. Now you want to go on to Alice Munro?
Briefly. Should we say what happened? I mean, did I give enough
You need a
detail?
little more. Well, we both, and every writer in here, I think, greatly respects and reveres the work of Alice Munro. She won the Nobel Prize in Literature. She and my mother were born within 5-6 years of each other. But her private life, we, the public, did not know anything about this until she died. And her youngest daughter revealed in a very long and detailed essay in the Toronto Star that her mother was married a man who she should have really known better. He was really weird to start with.
And then you see him bubble up in these stories, and you can tell that she didn't have a very good. I mean, some of the men. I don't know if you've read Alice Munro deeply. Some of the men are super creepy.
Yeah,
And
that's the trouble.
Yeah.
Now when you look back.
Yeah.
And no. So her youngest daughter didn't live the whole year with her, but went to stay with mom and stepfather in the summer. And the first summer she stayed with them, he sexually assaulted her when Alice was gone, either taking care of her father.
9 years old or something.
9 years old. She was
very young.
She did go home and tell people. Her father did nothing, not really much. He said, well, next time you go there, we'll send your older sister with you, and she'll protect you.
And let's not tell your mother because it would kill her.
Let's not tell your mother because she's psychologically unstable and it would kill her. And then another little problem is that within 5 years, Alice found out, she didn't know from her daughter, but she found out from friends that her husband, had abused other girls. And she asked him if he had abused her youngest daughter, and he said, no, she's not my type. He was very.
Where have we heard that before?
Well, yeah, we're talking about a child. Yeah, so she had warnings. She was afraid of him, unfortunately. She was very
And impressed by him. I mean, he seems to have been, really intimidating with his intellect and his, demeanor and just.
Yeah. And the articles that have come out have been just great. Have you seen anyone, the New Yorker, the New York Times Magazine, and the New York Review of Books. And one of them posits that she didn't really have a lot of confidence in herself, and he knew about her very working class background and accepted her as such, because he came from the same area.
And her first husband had been very wealthy and very elite, and she had always felt sort of inferior, and so she married this man in reaction.
So it's a whole complex thing, but I don't wanna say bottom line, I'm so grateful to these daughters. It's not just that youngest one who told her story, but the other daughters too joined in and told many stories and understand their mother as well as anyone. And so I think it's opened up a conversation. I didn't know, it's important to say, one of these articles, Giles Hardy points out that most mothers stay with their husbands in such a case. He talked to a really fine psychiatrist who's written about it, and she did a study of 40 women who had this in their childhood, and all but 3 of the mothers stayed with their husbands. And in the other cases, they went back to their husbands. And we don't know if this is if it's a time period, but I've been following up with that writer. And also just how common this is, sadly. The CDC says 1 of 4 women was sexually abused as a child. Many, like 20% by family members, 5% by fathers or stepfathers. 5%, 1 in 20. So when I was in school, in middle school, thinking I'm so weird, somebody else in my classroom was probably another victim.
Can I just add that it's 1 in 4 men also?
Oh, okay, thank you.
It's just that it's very underreported by men,
Yeah.
but more research now shows that it's also men.
Yeah.
In your story, the birth father is still around.
Yeah.
And what was the relationship between the daughter and the birth father?
It was good. As you can see, she idolizes him, she idealizes him. And he sent her this ballerina doll so he understands her, her love of ballet. It's good, and the children see their father. I don't want to give any more away about the father. And there are glimpses, as the story goes on, Angela mentioned what a cast of characters, because the character, Kate, goes with her mother to Omaha, and then they go to the college town, Grinnell, where the parents met. And that allows me access into their marriage and into their youth, which was really nice, and I think adds sympathy to the mother. So
There's revelation.
There's revelations. I sneak my way into the early years of their marriage and divorce. And grandmothers, there's grandmothers, and my readers were always going, which grandmother is this? The grandmas are important.
Before we open it up to the group for questions, was there anything that surprised you in going through this process of multiple drafts and then finalizing it and having multiple readers read different drafts? And
I think we should tell the fun. It's a fun story about the beginning.
okay,
When the last time Angela saw a big draft, the first chapter was set in the therapist's office. As I told you, I was thinking I have to have this frame and start with the therapist's office. And she said, I like this chapter, but I don't think maybe editors wouldn't like you starting in a therapist's office. And I said, okay. I like getting assignments, so I wrote a new first chapter which starts in the memory care unit of of an assisted living place. And the mother and daughter are trying to, daughter is trying to help her mother with exercises. And I sent that whole novel, that was done, my book was done. I sent it to Michelle Hunneman, a wonderful novelist in Southern California. And she said, oh, I really like your first chapter, but I don't think you should start there. It's really depressing. This is death's waiting room. I mean, she's a rather humorous writer. Oh, don't start there. Just even if you just do a prologue, start somewhere else. So then it was sort of fun. I thought I've got another assignment, and I knew right what to do. I started with it is a prologue of the family gathering for Kate's wedding under a big oak tree. My first thought was, oh good, I get another tree. They gather under an oak tree for a photograph at the wedding, before the wedding and then the wedding, but it leads up to a tense moment between mother and daughter. So that was a surprise.
It's a great device because it gets the entire cast from all the time periods on the page at the beginning, and it also thematically launches this note of love and where you find love, which becomes very resonant by the end. That particular relationship, the marriage, becomes very resonant by the end, but we don't know that at the beginning. So it's the kind of thing where, you cast back upon the book and you see where it starts, and it feels very, of a piece, which is lovely.
I already had the photograph in the book later, and I thought, that's where I start.
And you had the tree in the book too, that became so important. The tree was in the class that she takes where they have to act out the
tree. So questions from you?
Where'd you get the title? Was that tree?
So glad you asked. It was an early title, but I was a little embarrassed by it. I thought it's so sentimental, and I'm not going to tell people about that title. But it was, I brainstormed many titles, and I finally came back to it. It already was with the publisher under a different title, Roots and Branches, but I just thought, I don't really like that, and I went back to it, and everybody has liked it. There's an interesting story behind the title. I just came up with those words, but I put them into my search engine to see if anyone had used those words for a title before, and no one had as a book title, but I saw several entries about a Japanese word that translates sunlight through branches. And the Japanese word is komoretsu, and it's a real concept, the feeling you get when you're standing under a tree and light is shining. And then as soon as I learned that, I read a review of the movie A Perfect Day, or Perfect Days, Japanese movie about a man who cleans toilets, public toilets.
Inventors, yeah.
Wonderful movie. He's an educated, intelligent man, but this is what he's doing for his life. And every noon, he takes his lunch and eats outside under trees, and he takes photographs of light shining through branches. And then at the end of the movie, they use that phrase. They explain komoretsu. So I thought that's really just a nice discovery. Okay, title. Yes.
Yeah, with the different time periods, this is kind of a technique-y question. How did you either make connections between sections or chapters, or make contrast in going from
You just had to be really on your toes at the beginning of a new chapter. I guess I toyed with the idea of having a place name or a year, but I abandoned it and just trusted the reader. I've been given these tangible, concrete, images or names or something. And Angela would have pointed out, if any, you know, I've just read so much in my life. I've read great, good writers, and just, you pick those things up. My final copy editor, who did want me to add one, but I didn't do it. I really thought, nobody else has said they were confused. Yeah, so it's, yeah. And you can assume the reader might be confused for, you know, I mean, not know for 3 sentences. You know, you can start with some dialogue and trust that, oh, I'm gonna situate you. Yeah, Kirsten.
Related question, so once you decided on the 3-period structure, what was your process for choosing specific scenes for each of those periods? What were the challenges of working within that structure?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah, how did you know, oh, this scene in the childhood scene is going to fit with the adult scene or the college age?
Gosh. Maybe if we, just one example, well, I skipped a lot. I do a lot with junior high, the junior high years, because it's right after the abuse starts, and one makes very close relationships in junior high, I think, middle school now, and then the characters, one character I really needed from that period. Angela insisted after that first version that I include first sex. I think we need to know what her sex, how her beginning relationships were, and so I needed a character there. I'm answering as best I can, and then I just let the reader not know much about high school and pick it up again.
So, and if memory serves, some of the chapters are contiguous.
Yes,
So,
yes.
and so the jumps are between time periods, not within the same time period. So
Well-
they belong together. There's a set of chapters.
There's a
and
set
then-
of chapters,
yeah.
yeah, they're not so broken up. There's usually a set of chapters.
So you didn't have a schema in your mind?
Absolutely not.
Okay, you just kind of wrote intuitively.
And then the challenge was, was ordering them
Yeah,
and how they fit together.
right.
And that was challenging and very interesting to do. You know, when are we ready? When can I leave this and we can go somewhere else?
Comment. I
This is my
kind of
husband.
interpret Kristen's question more, I mean, what I observed when you were writing this was that the time periods, I think, evolved from your idea of picking a theme, or that was the conflict that you were trying to resolve for that time period, and the time
Right.
period really came from what you were dealing with.
Right,
It's particularly
right.
the
So, yeah, well, I can give a good example. So the Omaha, which I started in Angela's class, I start with a stupid fight between
that was a
mother and daughter.
confrontation theme.
But they've been getting on each other's nerves for several days. They've been on the trip for several days, and there's a fight over the New York Times, who gets the front section at breakfast. And then I get them apart from each other, and I have the daughter kind of cooling down and thinking, and just in the way you do after an argument, just going through all these other issues that you have with this person. And she's in a beautiful place. It's a big parade ground at Fort Omaha. And then she can easily go back into the childhood from there and think what her mother said and does, and it just in a very free way, because she's upset, and so she's associating. Free associations are happening, and that gets me to, and there's trees, to Rockabye Baby, And that gets me to the childhood, singing Rockabye Baby to the new baby in the family. You see what I mean? So Greg's point is very good. The theme guides you. What do I need thematically? Yeah, Kelly?
As someone who hasn't published something yet, who desperately wants to, I've also started a bunch of fiction and never publish it because I get halfway through it and I'm like, this is the worst thing in the world. How did you fight, if you experienced it, ever? Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome or like feeling like you weren't a writer that should write? And how did you combat that
That's really a good question.
and also for my partner, how do you support someone going through a writing process
Oh.
so that when I get home, I can tell him I have homework for you?
Listen for Greg.
Yeah. But like, you know, what sorts of struggles did you have yourself through
What a
this
good
process?
question, yeah. I can tell you for sure, so I think I mentioned that I started writing in high school. I took some great fiction writing classes at UC Berkeley. Had a wonderful teacher who was encouraging. And then in my 30s, I did some writing, not too disciplined about it. And I can remember so well that I could never say to anybody, I am a writer. I could not say that. I don't think I could say that through my 30s. And although I can say I'm a pianist, I'm a gardener, but the fear was there. It was so intimidating, I guess. So, but eventually I did get over it. And I would give a plug to the Napa Valley Writers Conference for being a great community, for meeting many other writers and reading with them and knowing writers. I mean, the friendships among writers are the best. We really understand each other.
Yeah, a community of writers really helps with the
Yeah.
imposter syndrome because you
Yeah.
realize everybody has it.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
people who've published many books. You know, I remember listening to one of the last interviews, I think, with Philip Roth, saying that, and if you've read a lot of Philip Roth, you know, there's a similarity to, you know, what he does over and over again, but him saying, I have to discover the voice is new to me every time, and I was like, wow, it's not new to me every time, but just the feeling that if he felt like he knew what he was doing too much, then he was doing something wrong, and that's after 35 books. Or
Yeah,
however many books.
and
So
then he
it's-
announced, you know, I don't know, a few years
Yes.
before he died, he put it on his refrigerator, the struggle to write novels is over, I'm done. The struggle, it was always a struggle. But in answer to your second question, I have a great husband, supporter. He read so many drafts and so many chapters and so many scenes and gave me good advice. I met him in a creative writing class in college, so that helped. How to support? But you even when you were busy working, you read my work. He's always my first reader.
Okay. Yeah. My boyfriend is not a creative writer. He's an IT guy, so it's a little different. But I've always, because I didn't grow up with like a community of writers, so.
I hear that our relationship, writer and reader, is very unusual in a marriage, and that most people don't show their spouse their work.
I show mine. He's in the back there.
Sean, yeah.
I think it's much easier to show someone your work if they're not also writing.
Oh, yeah.
I have friends who are
yeah.
married to writers who
Yeah.
that's a struggle.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
a struggle.
I
And they do it,
saw
but it's
Yeah.
it's a little bit different.
Always gonna think it's terrible. It's not what.
Yeah,
it is.
or there's just a competition, or they're
Yeah.
at different stages in their career, or one's been published a lot and one's not been published very much, and it just there's a kind of a
yeah, there's always gonna be a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know one couple where they say we keep an iron firewall or something, you know, between our writing lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just tell them what kind of feedback you want and what kind you don't.
Yes, that's what I do with my cooking. I say, how much do you like it? Not
That's
One more question Rosie says we can have.
I just wanted to, I bought your book, I'm looking forward to reading it, and I just want to thank you for your comment on Alice Munro. I grew up in Canada, and she was always a hero of mine, and when I discovered what had happened, I had a really big struggle with it.
Yeah.
And I still do.
Yeah.
I was very judgmental, I'll be honest, you know, I just,
Yeah.
thought, why would you, you know, how could this have happened? I was extremely disappointed, and trying to kind of understand her point of view in any of it.
It was, you know, it was a weakness. It just simply was
Yeah.
a terrible weakness. This human, but her writing gives us the impression of someone in control.
Yeah.
And there's really interesting things been discovered, written about the story she wrote that's closest to what happened after her daughter told her. It's called Vandals. She wrote to her agent saying, I've been trying to write a story about the subject, and it's killing me, it's made me ill, I can't go on with it. But then she said, 2 weeks later, she took it up again, she was able to master this. But she had, as an artist, she had a drive and control that was totally missing from her personal life. And when you read about her childhood, and you can see the origins of it. She was beaten as a child. Her mother told her father to beat her.
Yeah, I mean, she's such an interesting character because for me, she was the only writer who I read who gave me permission to write from a rural setting or from, you know, about topics that, you know, when I was coming up, you know, the first best American short stories I ever read was before Alice Munro was publishing it, and it was, you know, every writer was from New York, every writer had been to Europe 50 times, you know, and I was from a town of 3,000 in rural Kentucky, you know, I've never seen anything except for Winesburg, Ohio, that looked like what I was trying to do, and Alice Munro, you know, the very thing that made her so insecure, you know, and second guessing herself and possibly, you know, made it harder for her to leave her husband, you know, opened a whole world to me about like approaching my own material.
Her first story published in the New Yorker, she describes a kitchen in rural Ontario, where they added a little bathroom, a little water closet in the kitchen, so that everyone could hear the bathroom's noises, she says. And then you came out of the bathroom and everybody just pretended nothing had happened. And when the New Yorker editor got that story, they wanted to publish it, but the editor wanted to take out bathroom noises. So that tells you what society was like. They left it in.
Yeah, it was like Mavis Gallant. It was like you have Mavis Gallant and then you have Alice Munro, and I love Mavis Gallant too, but for very different reasons.
Yeah.
But back to your book, I'm really looking forward to reading it. I think
Okay,
that's
thank you.
the
Yeah.
power of fiction is trying to sort of break through those very complicated components of life. So thank you very much.
Okay.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I absolutely love the chapter that you read. And we see that little girl in the dancing lesson and all the little details about her letter that was a little dirty from the time before. And we are totally with her and it's so charming. And then there is this fall into the fear that she has in the car. And this is so moving, and you really got that totally right.
Thank you. Okay, let's, I'll sign some books and we have a little more wine.